Are you getting pressure from finance to justify or reduce your cloud bill? CloudZero is the only cloud cost platform loved by engineers and trusted by finance. CloudZero can identify unused, idle, or over-provisioned resources, alert you to spend anomalies, and organize 100% of your spend into a framework that mirrors your business structure, like cost per customer, product feature, or team. It's the most powerful platform ever built to provide accurate, granular visibility into your total cloud spend without the typical pitfalls of legacy cloud cost management tools like endless tagging or clunky Kubernetes support. Manage cost, optimize development, and maximize profit, all in one platform. Join companies like Rapid7, Drift, and SeatGeek by visiting cloudzero.com/cloudcast to get started. That's cloudzero.com/cloudcast. Visit today to experience immediate and ongoing savings on your cloud bill.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We're coming to you live from our massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. And we have a fantastic topic for this week. We're going to be digging back into, as we've kind of done beginning of the year in, say, 2022, 2023, talking about VC and the VC markets and trends we're seeing in the last couple of years. And more specifically, because it's really been in the news, especially in the last year, talking about VCs and open source. And we're going to dig into that with our good friend of the show, Aneel. Aneel's been with us a number of times in the past, and it's good to both hear an update from him and hear what's new. So with that, we're going to jump right in, and that's coming up right after the break.
Transform your business with Microsoft Azure, the one-stop shop for everything cloud and AI. With Azure Migrate and Modernize, move your existing workloads to Azure with ease. With Azure Innovate, build new solutions with focused and deep engagement. Their core offerings provide comprehensive resources, expert assistance, and cost optimization tools. Accelerate your cloud journey and stay ahead of the competition with Microsoft Azure. Visit aka.ms/Azure Hero Offerings to learn more. That's aka.ms/Azure Hero Offerings to learn more. And we're back. And Aaron, it has been a minute since you and I have talked. You've been traveling some and fighting some infectious diseases and other wonderful things. How are you doing, man? How's 2024 treating you so far?
Yeah, it's been an interesting couple months. Let's just say that. I mean, I hadn't really talked about it much on the podcast, but hey, I ran a marathon, but long term, I think I'm really paying the price for that marathon.
You beat the marathon, and the marathon is beating you now.
Yes, without a doubt. Yeah,
you won the battle.
Yeah, I've got some chronic stuff going on that's just not going away, and I'm on the bazookas of medicines all to try and finally, hopefully, get better. So we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. So for our audience, enjoy what might be at any moment, Aaron's last podcast or Aaron's last year of podcasting. So
that's right.
Good. Well, listen, we are continuing our kicking off 2024 series as we always do at the beginning of every year, sort of look aheads, and excited to bring back a longtime friend of the show, longtime guest of the show, and I think he's been doing this now 3 or 4 years. So very, very excited to have good friend Aneel Lakhani, investor at Crane Venture Partners. Aneel, welcome, man. Great to have you back.
Most appreciated. It is nice to be back. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Where in the world do we find you today?
Today you find me in London. Crane is based in London, so I am here frequently.
Awesome.
Very nice.
Well, listen, for folks that maybe new to the show, haven't listened the last couple of Januaries, give folks real quick what you focus on over at Crane, and then we'll dive into today's topic.
Sure. So Crane is an early stage investment firm. We do pre-seed and seed investment. So basically pre-product up through like alpha, beta, or just launched with a handful of customers. We primarily focus on what you can think of as infrastructure software. So a lot of open source, a lot of data stuff, a lot of core developer tooling, things like that. And then a little bit in security and B2B payments and supply chain and logistics and some other spaces where we have some in-house expertise.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
So, hey, Aneel, I was really interested in a talk you gave recently. So you talked at Monktoberfest, and you've been a past alumnus of Monktoberfest. I've seen you there in the past as well. But tell everyone a little bit about this talk. I mean, it really boiled down to money in software, and specifically open source software these days. I think the market's changed a little bit, and VCs really are requiring high returns on investments, but the software seems to have a very short window to gain and get adoption. And so tell everyone a little bit about your thesis behind that.
Sure. First, a plug for Monktoberfest. If you haven't gone, you should go. It is one of the best conferences that has ever been made. That's all I'll say on that. So I've been adjacent to or in or out of open source businesses for 20 plus years at this point. And my first experience of open source was the guy who sat next to me at my first job in tech in 96, I think. 96, that sounds right. Handed me a Slackware CD. And I became an open source person at that point. So I have a personal love for open source, but there are very few extremely successful open source businesses, and extreme success is what VCs specifically look for. And when you take money from an investor, you have agreed to make money for an investor. And the genesis of this talk was, it was spurred, of course, by the change in Hashicorp's licensing last year, and the ongoing discussion about licensing in open source that involves some people from Redbunk like Stephen O'Grady and some people from the community like Adam Jacob. And it's been an ongoing discussion for a number of years now. So I've been on the open source user and contributor side. I've been in businesses that use open source, although they weren't predicated on open source, weren't open source businesses per se. And now I'm an investor, and I invest in companies, some of which are open source and some of which are not. Roughly half of our investments in the current fund are open source. And I'm watching those businesses try to get built. And so I thought it was important to, at least within a community of people that are open source oriented and are startup people and are maybe trying to build businesses, to talk about all the ways in which these things might be incompatible, or they might not work the way we try to do them. And that's how the talk came to be.
Yeah, it's an interesting talk. It's ever since the Hashicorp news came out and they changed their licensing. Everybody again, as normal, has an opinion about it. It's the more I think about your talk, the more I think about how, even though everybody has, a lot of people have been living around the open source ecosystem, how it feels like there's such, most systems that tend to work over time, you get this alignment between different people's priorities. They may not be, exactly aligned, but in terms of, what makes certain things successful, you tend to get these. And it's weird that there's such what feels like a misalignment, right? So, in your talk, you talk about, kind of the outsized returns that are expected out of VC investments, just because the level of, times that that it fails, just the odds, you've got to win 1 in 10, it's got to be 10x or 100x or whatever. So you've got this outside expectations for lots of money. You listen to people like Adam, who, lived through Chef. He's been on the show before. He's like the one person in the software community who's like, you all should just sort of follow Red Hat's model. That's the only model that's ever worked. And everybody else in the community is like, nope, that'll never happen again. And it's weird that we have such a disconnect between what, what different parties, and then you've got the whole, chunk of the sort of the open source community, people who are just like, I just want someone to pay me to fix bugs. That's all I want. I'm not trying to get rich. I'm not trying to.
Absolutely.
And it's weird that there's just not more sort of in between those poles on a spectrum. That open source has survived so long. Just the fact that it hasn't coagulated around something that's a little more what feels like sustainable.
Yeah, so there are a couple of things here to tease out. One is that building a business is building a business, and a lot of people who who run open source projects or create open source projects, their default method for seeking financing for those projects, which is to say pay themselves so they can work on them full time, is to try to build a business. And that doesn't necessarily work. That in and of itself, I think, is problematic, because the right way to finance a project that you want to work on may not necessarily be for you to build a business, because you might be terrible at building a business. You probably are terrible at building a business and do not want to build a business.
Right.
And, every 1 out of every 1,000 or whatever developers are able to become CEOs, which is not a knock on them. That's not the thing they want to do. So they're not going to optimize their lives around becoming expert founders and CEOs, and that's fine. But the problem is that we've sort of, as an industry, decided that that's the only way to do things. On the flip side, it's like open source is incredible. The literal world that we live in runs on open source in the same way that it runs on microchips. That's the same way that it runs on power infrastructure, right? Like without open source, the world will sort of fall apart as it is, as we experience it. And so we do need to figure out, again, as an industry, how to make open source sustainable without coupling it to like the ways we make some other things sustainable that clearly aren't working or don't work well.
Right. Yeah, it is a new interesting challenge. I mean, even the thing you said, like the world runs on open source software, the same way it runs on microchips, but like nobody is clamoring for the chips to necessarily be free. There's not, right? Like there's money made down below software, and then for some reason the important part we're like, no, that should be free, and which is super people intensive as opposed to the hardware, which isn't necessarily super people intensive.
Yeah, and it's not. I don't think it's necessarily wrong. I don't think it's right or wrong. Actually, I don't think there's a moral statement about the desire for software to be free or open source software to be free. I think it is, but I do think it is crazy to expect that groups of people will work to maintain and build something. I mean, some of them will do it on their free time for fun, and that's fine. It's great. It's great that they do that. They have that outlet. It's awesome. But it's crazy to expect that anyone owes you anything, that anyone owes you applying a patch or responding to a PR or doing an integration or fixing a bug, when they don't get paid to do that. That if they were doing that all the time for something that you thought was important, a project that they made, then how do you expect them to feed their kids or themselves or have health insurance? Like all this, these are real human beings with real needs, and the way we deal with that is we have a system where people have jobs and they make money and they spend that money to get the things that they need. And if you're like, oh, we're going to have this whole other system where we have an expectation that people don't get paid and that I don't want to pay people for the work they're doing, we're really like destroying the system.
Right.
Well, and so Aneel, I almost think of it this way too, and I'd love to get your perspective from VCs and an investment standpoint. So there's almost like, for better or worse, there's almost three poster children for the models. There's the VMware, built a closed source, and maybe the last one that built a closed source big business like that. Then there's the Red Hat model, which we've already talked about, that was successful, and folks are always like, hey, why can't you go do that again? And then we also mentioned there's the Hashicorp model, which is a little bit more of the, maybe I guess the latest accepted way of, hey, you've got early days, everything is free, so you get awareness for free or marketing for free, but then because all of it was free to start, how and when do you flip that switch to monetization because the user expectations are free? Is there a new way to build the business and create that moat?
I'll argue with you a little bit about what you describe as what Hashicorp's model here is. Their license change is more defensive against competitors than it is extractive from customers. Although in some cases, although in some cases it will be extractive from customers. That's like a business decision that they have to make about whether or not they're going to attempt to be extractive. However, it's the idea of competition building something off of your free open source software has been true forever. So, like, for you to try to do something about it 10 plus years or whatever into your existence is just disingenuous. Or you just weren't thinking that whole time that there would be real competition if you were successful, that successful does not draw competitors. Then I don't know what world you live in, but it's not this one. So I think the main problem we experience here, at least if we narrow the conversation to license changes, is some cognitive dissonance and a bait and switch feeling that users and customers have when you basically change terms on them is what you're doing, right? And it's one thing if you've been proprietary and paid the whole time, and between V6 and V7, you're like, hey, we're doing new payment terms, or we're going to require you to do net 30 instead of net 90, or we're going to change the license fees for reuse or whatever. Those expectations have been set that things like that can happen from day one. When you do that in open source, you're like, if you've never set those expectations, then by definition, what you're doing is like destroying the thing that people thought they would have when dealing with you. So you're basically removing a promise that you made to your users, to your customers, and I find that to be problematic. Now, if we talk broader about what open source models work as business models, I think we're just wrong that we couple these things. I think they're unrelated and they should be unrelated. A thing can be open source and a thing can be a business, and an open source thing can be a business and a closed source thing can be a business, and that's just it. Like there's no reason that an open source thing has to be a business, and there's no reason that a business has to be open source, and there's no reason that the correct way to finance an open source project is by turning it into a business, and there's no reason that every piece of infrastructure software has to be open. Like these things are not actually attached.
Yeah. It is the weird thing that we tend to do at our industry, which is like, oh, they're an open source company, and it's like, no, they might be an open source development model, like an open source sort of engineering, but that doesn't necessarily mean that their business is quote unquote open source, because if we got into sort of, well, definitionally, then that means their business, which is by definition intended to make money, is not defined to make money. It's a weird sort of thing. Yeah.
And if you're willing to accept that these things aren't actually related or don't have to be related, then you can or should have the conversation about, oh, should this piece of software be open source? Is there a reason for it to be open source other than money? Money shouldn't be one of the reasons. Is there a reason for it to be open source? And then you can have a conversation that's something like, how do we make money? Ignoring whether or not the piece of software is open source. And then maybe you might come to the conclusion that the right way to make money is that you have a piece of open source software with a license, whatever that license is, and then you have a piece of closed source software, which is and you could decide that it's the exact same code as the open source software, except it has a license that has different commercial terms. You can actually do that. There would be nothing wrong with that. It's just that people don't do that because we've got these weird attachments in our brain about how things should work.
Right. We've told ourselves things like the only way to market software anymore is to give it away for free, and that's the only way to attract users because you can't afford marketing in the first X number of years and all those sort of things.
Yeah, another way to attract users is to solve a problem that they have that no one else is solving.
Right. So in that context, there's anytime you're around technology people in general, there's always sort of conspiracies and big company is out to get me and somebody is going to do wrong, and so there's sort of this talk of, especially after the Hashicorp thing, although we point to Hashicorp. There's been a number of companies who have sort of done this license change.
They are definitely not the only ones. They're just the last big one.
Yeah,
this has been a thing for decades.
Right, recency bias. There's this new sort of talk track that happens in various places where people go, I'm pretty sure now. And I think the reason for this is because the Hashicorp CEO, who again, I'll point out, wasn't the original folks. It wasn't Anand and Michael. It was the new guy that came in a couple of years ago. Somewhere on some video, he kind of makes this statement of like, yeah, we sort of have been planning this for a while. We've just, we've been growing the user base. We wanted to make sure we had this stable thing. And he was the guy who came in after they went IPO and so forth. But there's now this sort of, I'll call it conspiracy theory that somehow now VCs, and again, not putting any of this on you, are sort of negotiating the timeline of the quote unquote rug pull ahead of time. I'm not even going to ask that question because it seems like a ridiculous question. But I am curious as a VC, because you're obviously in the early stages, like at what point do you go from thinking about an idea that somebody comes to you with in terms of like, is this idea novel? Could it grow to a size that's impactful in the world, to start thinking about like, well, how would they turn this into a business? Like what's your typical thought process or timeline? Are you thinking about it from day one, or do you tend to think about it more from like between a seed round and a first round? Like where's the juxtaposition between like, does technology make enough change, and could this thing be monetizable happen from your perspective as a VC?
So to be frank, I think about it in the first discussion. It's my job, right? Like that is my job. And every VC is, and anyone who says they're not is lying to you. Like it is our job as investors to make a decision about whether or not there is a profitable business here, or minimally a high growth business that can be sold for a large profit. So we are never not thinking about it. And part of the things I look for, besides, could this be a great product that solves a big problem for a large and ideally growing set of users, who some portion of which are willing to be customers and pay for the thing because it's a big enough problem in a business setting where they can allocate some of the money that their business makes to this to solve it because it's worth it for them. Like that's always a thought. And then one of the things that goes along with that is do these people here in front of me who built this thing actually want to do that? Do they actually want to build a business? And often the rub is right there. Like, a lot of people don't actually want to build a business, or just pretending, and they may or may not come around to it in the future. And I have to sort of make that call many years before they come around to it.
Yeah, makes sense.
Interesting. So, Aneel, we mentioned VMware. I'm going to bring them up again. We've said before that, and we've said it quite a few times on this show, that there will probably be, like, VMware might have been the last big enterprise software company, for all kinds of various reasons, right? But I'll kind of ask you, with everything we've talked about here, has the era of an open source enterprise startup, is that truly over, or does it just change into something different? What is your thoughts on the future of the big enterprise software company?
Yeah, I definitely don't think it's over. I don't think the era. Well, first, the era of big enterprise software is not over. Second, the era of big enterprise software companies that also happen to open source some of their software is certainly not over. And the era of wholly proprietary big enterprise software companies, like none of this is over. I do think that we need more exploration of more models, of more different kinds of maybe approaches to licensing, or approaches to building proprietary and open source at the same time, or adjacent to each other, or the order in which things happen, or what is and isn't upstream, and in a way that's less, let's say, artificial, because if you'll notice, a lot of the lines that people draw around what are going to be enterprise features or what's going to be open source or what you're going to monetize are just in many ways arbitrary and not super justifiable. You're like, oh, all these things are just proxies for scale or proxies for complexity. You could just charge people for scale directly instead of like drawing a fake boundary around some features, right? Like I think there are many ways to do things that are simply not explored, that probably will be explored, or at least hopefully people in my position will push for their exploration. But yeah, the era is not over. It has not passed. We're not going to see a decrease really in the number of enterprises on Earth. They don't necessarily grow that quickly, but they also don't shrink. So they still need to be served, and they're the ones who spend the most money on software. So the business is there.
Yeah. When you mentioned sort of exploring some of these things, how would either, somebody in your role, maybe not necessarily you, but somebody on the money side of things, go about exploring it? Is it potentially something where somebody comes to you and goes, here's an idea, and you sort of go into almost sort of mentor mode or advisor mode where you say, hey, maybe you should try this? Or, are you seeing or hearing ideas about how to build moats or how to do monetization being sort of shared around sort of experimentally, if you will?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, every VC is different, and
Sure.
we all kind of operate differently with our companies and the founders that we work with. But I, especially if you do what I do, which is early stage founders, like pre-product and market, you have the opportunity to discuss, right, what this might look like in the long run, what monetization will look like where a paywall goes up, where it doesn't, what things we charge for, what things we don't charge for, where the value really is, and that kind of thing. So I think at least if you're early, you have the opportunity to have a dialogue with founders or people building things about this, and they may be willing to try different things because of that. I also actually have, at least recently, and I guess this may be spurred partially by Hashicorp, more founders building open source things who want to experiment, who want to not repeat the experiences they see other people having with open source, with companies that are also open source software creators, like experimenting or trying to do legal or monetary or license-oriented things well into their life when they have, thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of users. Like I'm seeing founders who want to start playing around and trying different models early, so by the time they hit some scale, they maybe they don't create a negative experience for their users and customers.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Makes sense. I'll leave it with this sort of one last thought, and I'll be curious if this ever happens, because it feels like, again, it goes to the sort of mismatched ideas. I feel like there's, we have this culture where, some of these engineers start off, and like you said, they don't necessarily know how to run a business, don't necessarily want to run a business, but the idea of being the CEO, the idea of being sort of the face of this big idea is appealing. I'm curious if you ever hear inklings of people being like, I'd love to sort of run this through the first stage, run it through seed A or something along those lines, and then just sort of hand it off. Do you see people, or is it still just the fascination of being like, right, I want all the glory of it getting, big and huge? Or are there people who are just like, no, that, small but interesting was important to me? Has that kind of ambition changed at all over time, or is that still kind of the driving force for folks wanting to be the CEO and start companies?
I think that, I don't know if it's changed or we're just seeing people who want to do the different things more often. But I have definitely encountered founders or people who are building open source projects who want to be CEOs, who want to build big businesses, who want to make a lot of money. I've also definitely encountered some who want to build small, tightly controlled, like a project team that makes decent money, but it's not a high growth business and just need to figure out a way to pay people. And I've also encountered people building projects who absolutely do not want to be founders and do not want to build companies. They just want someone else to monetize their software and pay them, which is very interesting that is true.
Yeah. It's the so it becomes the OEM round, if you will, at that point.
Right. Which is, by the way, an interesting idea and an interesting potential variation on how we do things.
Yeah, I know, and again, this would be fodder for an interesting other show. I know at one point when I was at Cisco, we had sort of this internal incubator. So sort of a similar idea of like people would go work on, future looking stuff. And the hardest thing we had was they would come up with interesting things. They were smart people. And the handoff was so hard because it was like, well, I don't just want your software because I wouldn't necessarily know what to do with it. I need the people. And the people are like, no, I want to stay back here doing the stuff. I don't want to get sucked into your bureaucracy, or I don't want to get, I like to work on it when it's small and interesting. And it was, the handoff was so difficult to perfect, but it was 15 or 20 years ago. It might be something that now that people are used to open source and taking things that are other people's software and integrating them, like maybe we've evolved as a software species, if you will.
Right. And I think there is something to that idea of a handoff that could be a rich vein to mine, because there are a lot of situations where people are happiest and best suited to doing a thing, whatever that thing is, however they do it, and trying to like square peg round hole them into a different role or into a different way of being. It just isn't going to work. It's gonna eventually blow up in everyone's face. So you just don't do it and find something else. And handoffs, some version of that might be what something else is.
Yeah. I think we might get our first look at it, given all the money that went into the 2020, 2021 unicorns, with them maybe not having the most viable exits coming up. The handoff model may get tested here in the next year or so. It'll be interesting to watch. Well, listen, Aneel, we have taken up more than enough of your time, especially on a Friday. You're probably getting ready to go do something interesting around London. Thank you, as always, for kicking off our year for us, man. It's good to catch up. Hopefully we get to do this somewhere live again. I know you were at KubeCon Europe. I don't know if you'll be there again this year, but hopefully we'll get a chance to catch up. If you are in the interesting ideas business, we always recommend give our friend Aneel a call. He is always a good ear for listening, as well as obviously now has access to helping people grow things. So, man, thank you always for the insight. Great to catch up. With that, Aaron, I hope you're feeling better. And folks, with that, I'm going to wrap it up. We will talk to you all next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.